Sweet. Let's do it. Make a shake. Let's see.
The
All right.
Texans made me a
The
wonder
Texans.
and got a win, even though I predicted them not to. All that and more on this
Ooh,
edition.
ooh, ooh, ooh. mm. All right. Let me think. I got it. I got it. The Texans get their first win in Baltimore ever in history. Oh goodness. I had it and I lost it. Ooh. The Texans thrashed the Ravens to get their first win in Baltimore in their history. We're going to talk about that and more on this edition of the Bullpen. Hello and welcome to the Bullpen. As always, I'm James Roy, and with me is Tom Chaparria. Tom, how are you doing today?
I mean, it's hard not to be doing really well. The Texans did something that I don't know that we've seen them do. We're going to get into it, but I mean, this victory had so much to it. There's so many layers. It's not your normal Texan dub, and it made for a very interesting, can't tell me nothing Sunday.
Can't
One
tell
of
me
those.
nothing.
Hey, my Texans went out there and smoked a team. Can't tell me nothing.
Hey, yeah, I mean, and trust me, people are trying to tell you something about that, but we'll get into it in a minute. Positives and negatives we'll start with, as we always do. Tom, biggest positive, biggest negative on your end. What do you got?
Positive for me, I feel that the Texans showed a different level of intent. Like we've seen in the past, this team has gotten up on teams and have never really like stepped on a dude's throat and just I'm not stopping. You have to stop me. The Texans scored on their first 6 drives. Like I can't tell you a time where I saw them as aggressive, as committed to, you know, I'm going for more. We've seen them get to a point where they feel comfortable with whatever lead they've amassed, and it's like, all right, now we're gonna play kind of not to lose. I never felt like at any point in this time with this game that the Texans were like not trying to search for more points. I don't know if this was a byproduct of the Christmas game, which a lot of people are going to talk about, or the fact that this is the identity that the Texans want to have as a team that's like, look, we don't care what the score is. We're trying to make plays. We're trying to move the ball. We are trying to execute our offense. And we're not letting the scoreboard dictate how we're going to do it.
Yes, and even when they pulled the starters, like the offense was still running like it was trying to score. They didn't like just hand the ball off 3 times and punt it. Like they were getting after it. But what about a negative? What's your biggest negative from this game? I know it's going to be a little harder to find here,
So,
but dig
so
deep.
the negative for me, if there is a negative, is going to be the perception of this game. There's going to be the national media is going to try to tear this win down, and rightfully so, right? They had Astro level injuries, and any of y'all that are Astros fans know that they set a record this past season for injuries for a season, like a team with as many injuries as they had. So you can't look at what they did to Baltimore and look past that. Now, does that mean that the guys that they ran out there weren't NFL players? No. Did that stop John Harbaugh from saying that this was a get right game for them, knowing that he was going to be potentially be out of these plays? No. So am I going to lessen the importance of the victory? Absolutely not. I do expect people to go, oh well, you hadn't beat nobody yet. You beat a Tennessee Titan team that's really bad. You beat a Baltimore Ravens team that's a shell of themselves. So we're gonna need to see you do it against somebody good. That's the potential negative. Um, if I'm really, really, really nitpicking, although I don't see this as a negative. Some people do, mainly because they have him on their fantasy rosters. The inability to get Woody Marks the ball more for a lot of people is a negative. Woody Marks exploded onto the scene last weekend, and everybody was spending all of their fab budget to go get him on their roster in waivers. And then all he did the following week was rush 7 times for 24 yards. They did not throw him the football, which cost me money in prize picks and other various daily fantasy forums because 16 and a half yards was the prop. And I was like, that is going to be the easiest 16 and a half yards ever. And they didn't throw the ball not once.
crazy. Yeah, I see that, and I picked him up in a league, but I didn't start him. So, but my brother-in-law is pretty mad at me because he did pretty bad in fantasy, and I was like, yeah, pick up Woody Mark, start him, give me your lineup. He's gonna get all the ball all the time. So I feel you on that, and to speak to your point, I mean, looking at it, I get it, and that's like, I mean, the first thought that I had was like, great, we beat an injury-riddled Ravens team that we were expected to win against. That's good, but I still need to see it against the Seahawks. And the Seahawks, to their credit, put together a really good performance this week, which made that matchup both more intimidating and more validating in the future, in my opinion, if the Texans can pull that off going into Seattle on Monday Night Football. But they have plenty of time to prepare for it going into the bye week. So I don't think it's necessarily all bad, but I can see that perception is just going to, it gives people ammo to discredit the game. So I feel you on that. If I'm looking for my biggest positives and negatives, biggest positive is that on top of the fact that the offense ran efficiently this week, to say the least, I like that CJ. You'll notice there wasn't a 100-yard receiver. I think the highest receiving yards guy was 60, but CJ was distributing the ball to a variety of people. It didn't feel like he was too latched on. So like, I think at points there's been this feeling that like if Nico's not available or if Nico's not being used right, CJ can't get his production in. But CJ through 85% completion rate, completed 23 passes, and there was a wealth of wide receivers that were getting the ball. He was distributing it really well, and those wide receivers were not making like gimme catches. Like if you look at Hutch's second touchdown, like that was not an easy catch to make. Like so, I think it's validating on both sides that CJ, one, can distribute the ball all over the field, and two, that all these wide receivers that some of them we've been waiting on for a while, like Hutchinson, to have that game where we go, okay, here he is, versus guys that are rookies that are still, they're in that window of like, hey, let's see what you got, get out there and see what you can get done. Seeing them all get opportunities and make some pretty good catches and give CJ what he needed to have a really good game was a huge positive on my end. And then as far as negatives go, I mean, I agree with you on perception. It's really hard to find negatives. But I think it's been a pretty consistent theme for the past couple weeks. It's not been all season, but the defense did kind of get caught on their heels to start the game. I don't know how that's not like a massive negative to me. I think in any game, if your defense has one rough drive, and it wasn't even that bad, they gave up a field goal. It feels a lot worse given that the Ravens offense was missing Lamar Jackson and a lot of the talent that they have. But it set a tone for the game that made me a little concerned at first. But obviously the defense stepped up and shut them down pretty much the whole rest of the game. So it was basically a non-factor, and that's me like grasping for a negative. It's just very hard to find one from this matchup. But looking at this, so this is the first win in Baltimore. How do you feel, since you brought it up as a negative? How do you feel about this matchup and the perception of it as being less valid because of injuries? Do you think that there's any merit to that discussion, or is it still a win as a win? How do you feel about it?
So I'm always going to be pro a win is a win. No one cared about the Texans' injuries on the offensive line last season. Nobody cared about any time the Texans were at a disadvantage. It wasn't a big deal. Like, oh, they just got to be better. So while I recognize like, hey, I can't get incredibly high on this victory. I don't want to sit there and go, oh my God, it's Super Bowl or bust now because they look so good in this game. Like, I need to see them do that against better talent to really feel that way. But this team desperately needed the win. Both teams did, really. I mean, as far as like what you feel you have to do to realistically make the playoffs. With the win, I feel like the Texans can go 8-5 and either win the division or win a wild card at 10-7. That sounds a whole lot easier to do than trying to go 9-4 the rest of the way to get to that same 10-win mark to feel like you have secured a playoff spot. So for me, I'm not going to worry about the national media. I rarely do anyway. They're normally really bad in dealing with Houston as a whole in general. We're this spot that they don't really want to love. Like, the West Coast has their bias, the East Coast has their bias, and somewhere in the middle is Houston, and they just don't like them.
Yeah, I feel you on that, and I mean to speak to it. One thing that you pointed out was making the wild card. I believe that every time the Texans have made the playoffs in their history, they've made it by winning the division. So it would be the first time they've ever made it as a wild card team, if I remember correctly. They play on wild card weekend every time, so it could be something I'm mixing up, but I'm pretty sure it's been every time. The only time I can think of where it might have been that they were a wild card team was when Brock Osweiler in 2016 with Brock Osweiler. I'm pretty sure that might have been a wild card, but other than that, I'm pretty sure they've always made it as a division winner. But not really relevant here. Looking at it, this matchup and the perception of it to me, I'm gonna try and work through. Last week you hit me with you're working through the logic differently, which is why you're coming across negative instead of positive like you usually do. So I'm gonna look at this matchup and I'm gonna find the positive in it. And so let's look at it. The Texans, injury riddled team, defense. I would say this team is about, without Lamar Jackson, probably as bad as the Titans, right? The Texans against the Titans the previous week had 3 quarters where they only scored 2 field goals, and the offense looked just as inept as it had pretty much the entire season. There was like signs of life, but like it was not. It was a lot of the same. And then in the fourth quarter, they put together 3 touchdowns and put together some really good offense against a really bad team. And then we go into Baltimore, and the whole game, 4 quarter against a comparable team to the Titans at this point. I hate saying that about the Ravens because like there's part of me, how sometimes you cling to things that are certain from your childhood and they like make you feel comfortable. Like the Ravens being a really good team is something that's always kind of been like, yeah, that's a thing. That's always been a thing. But they're comparable to the Titans, and the Texans put together 4 quarters of flawless offensive football against that team. Like 85% completion rate, running the ball effectively. I know people wanted to see Woody Marks more, but myself included. But Nick Chubb, there's a reason they kept handing it to him. If you watched, in the totality of the game, I tweeted early on, I was like, wow, every time that Woody Marks touches the ball, it makes you think, why are they running Nick Chubb? But as the game went on, Nick Chubb, I think, showed, why they kept turning to him. So that's my look there. And then I look at that and it makes me feel good about where this team is in terms of like what they can do, how good this offense is, and the progress that they're making. I had another point in my head, but I'm gonna be honest with you. I think it just totally vacated my head right as
I
I
got to
was
push
talking.
back on that though,
Oh, okay.
because
Here, you
I
talk. I'm gonna
don't. I,
think.
I don't believe that you're giving enough credit to what they were missing on defense. Yes, Lamar Jackson is a game changer, and that would have totally made them way more dangerous offensively. But I would argue that they were missing more on the defensive side of the football, and that's why the Texans look so good offensively. Uh, to lean on your Tennessee Titans comparison, I don't know what their sack numbers are. The Titans are for the season. I want to say they had 3 sacks on C.J. Stroud in that game. The Baltimore Ravens all season long had 4 QB sacks. Entire team, 4. 2 of them are Matabuke, who's on season-ending IR.
Jeez.
So they had no pass rush to speak of, which if you watch the game, you felt that way. No edge pressure. Everything I think was able to be kind of like I thought they did a really good job with the pocket, giving CJ plenty of room to step up, step over, step left, step right. So and then you talk about their secondary. They were missing both corners and star safety. Kyle Hamilton, who's supposed to stop the Texans in the secondary if you're missing all of that talent? Like, while I want to be so high on this win from an offensive perspective, part of me has to remain so grounded because they were missing so many pieces on the defensive side of the ball that the Texans were able to get whatever they wanted. And it showed. I tweeted out during the game, I was very happy that the Texans were doing what they were supposed to do. I felt like when they're missing all these pieces, they're supposed to go down and score touchdowns. And they did that. And they just kept stacking, and I love that. The one play that jumped out to me that really kind of like opened my eyes, which is the first thing I think I've ever noticed from the D'Amico Ryans era, where I was like, wow, that's a departure from anything else, was going for it on 4th and 1 from their own 39. Up 24, Baltimore just scored. I'm like, what are we doing? Like if you wanted to let him back in the game, this is how you do it. This
If
was
British Brooks is giving you 7.5 yards a carry, you got to take it.
true, but this is not something you would normally see them do. They
Oh
would
yeah, I
normally
agree with you.
kick the ball, play defense. D'Amico's like, I got a defense. I'm gonna play defense. This was them going, oh no, I have 100% faith in this offense. We're gonna go get that 1 yard, and then they get 6, 7 more, whatever.
And your point reminds me of the point that my other one. So thank you. That's why we're so good as a co-host duo, is that like we just feed off of each other like that. So, looking at the past 2 seasons, I don't know if you remember, but I can call out a few matchups. Falcons with Desmond Ritter. You look at the Jets on Halloween. Like I can name a few where the Texans were very clearly the better team and they were favored going into those matchups and they did not win those games. They let them go away. And one thing I noticed this season is if you look at it, that in matchups where they're playing like NFC contenders or like another team in the division who is currently 3-1, the Jaguars, those are games that they played close. They didn't come out on top, but it's hard to be. It is easy to be frustrated with the context of what was expected of the Texans this season, but it's hard to be frustrated understanding that they played the games that are tough close. And then they go into these games against the Titans and the Ravens. These are games that the really good Texans teams of the past 2 years would go into, and they would be clearly favored. And then we would see a dogfight that would end in a very close loss, where this team was supposed to win. I look back, they played the Saints, I think, and they lost to the Saints. I'm pretty sure, in a time where the Saints shouldn't be winning any football games. I could go through their schedule and look at so many games where they were supposed to win and they didn't, and then they had to win tough matchups in order to get that 10-win record that they had because they didn't have any other option. They weren't winning the games that they were supposed to. So one of my big takeaways from this that's a positive, aside from the fact that the offense was cohesive and that they moved it in spite of all the injuries to the Ravens defense, which by the way, all of the players that played in 2024 were injured. There was not injured or not on the roster. There was not a single player on that Ravens defense that the Texans faced last season. So looking at it that way, I think that it's a huge positive that the Texans went in, faced the Titans, crushed them, went in, and as the week went on, it started. Odds shifted. Like if you look, so I worked with Kalshi, this company that does props for sports and stuff. It's like stock market stuff, so it's in percentages. The Texans had a 22% chance to win the matchup when the odds posted at the beginning of the week, and by the time all the injuries came out and everything, the Texans were up like at 56% in terms of their chance to win before the match even happened. So looking at how that progressed as the week went on, this went from, hey, this is a tough Ravens team that the Texans never win against in Baltimore. They're going to have to go out and do something they've never done, to, okay, this is a matchup this team should win. This team should be able to march into Baltimore. As bad as the offense has been, if they're for real this year, they should be able to go into Baltimore and take it, and it shouldn't be a question. So I know last week, and Tom brought it up before we started recording. Last week, when I gave my score prediction, I didn't take the Texans in this one, and that was recorded before. To give you context, like that was recorded before all of the news broke. Like we knew that Lamar might not make it. Like we knew he had an injury, but we didn't know the severity of it. And I even said in the episode, I said this score prediction predicates on Lamar Jackson playing. But even I like would have changed my score prediction if I knew all of the injuries and everything that was going on around the Ravens going into this matchup. So I think that it's very important to understand that the Texans are doing what they're supposed to, and now I look at like the dynamo, right? In soccer, realistically, you got to win at home. You got to try your best to draw on the road. You got to take the easy wins at home, and you got to get the wins. Make your home environment hard to win in. And when I first started watching the Dynamo a couple of years ago, that's what they did. They hell in a shell. They would go in and they would crush teams in shell energy, and then they would go on the road and get some ties and a couple losses, and they'd make the playoffs. And they didn't do that this year. They got mollywopped at home a few times. Like they're just not doing what they're supposed to do there. So I take away from that. Similarly, I think the Texans are doing what they're supposed to do in that when they're supposed to win a matchup, they're winning it. And I know that might not be 100% how everyone else sees it based off of how you view the record going into the season or view the teams, but that's how I see it. So looking at let's kind of look into some of the performances of some individual Texans. and what they mean. I want to start with Jalen Petrie. One, because I saw the light on Jalen Petrie. Call me Saw turned Paw in this story. A flash of light, and all of a sudden, I'm Jalen Petrie's biggest fan. Um, After going out and trying to tell people how bad his sophomore season was, so I just want to give a lot of praise to Jalen Petrie and those two picks. What do you make of his performance? Because I think a lot of people's biggest issue still, and even I, to some extent, I'm like, his upturn has been because of the way D'Amico has used him, which has demanded less of him in coverage, which I have always kind of viewed as one of his, not his strongest suit. But obviously, in this game, he is right. Was it right place, right time, or was he really good in coverage? How do you view his performance?
I mean, so to start, in the same way that he saw the light, I feel like I'd like to think I feel like I provided the light because I have
Yeah.
constantly, been advocating for this dude. I've always thought he was a really good player. He needed to be in a specific situation, right? We got him in that star safety role. D'Amico, made that thing happen, and he's been phenomenal. If you need him to be in coverage, it should be on a running back or a tight end. And today, on a running back and a tight end, advantage Petrie. So I think that it's really good to try really hard to get your players in their best positions to be successful. I think D'Amico's done a really good job of that, especially with Jalen Petrie. Um, and the funny thing is like there were people, week one, Puka Nakua gets him, and it's Puka Nakua. Like for people that don't watch other teams, it's one of the top five receivers in the entire game. There,
Number
he's
one
gonna,
scorer in fantasy football.
yeah. The guy is a monster, and he's got a coach that is the best at scheming ways to get him open. But all anybody wanted to talk about was Jalen Petrie missing the assignment, and we're reverting back, and this is going to be bad. Fast forward now, he's an absolute monster. He had a great hit on Derrick Henry, which for Texan fans who've watched Derrick Henry run wild on them, to see him get put on his butt by Stingley and Petrie in this game was so satisfying. Like, just I can't like I needed a cigar after that. Like he that kind of torture from that one player. You have to celebrate. But then he had the amazing coverage on Henry, jumped the route like you're supposed to, and then right place, right time on Mark Andrews, just causing the bobble a little bit to be able to get the interception. I love what Jalen Petrie's doing. I think that when he got his contract extension, people were kind of like, now I don't see anybody complaining about his money.
I don't know why we saw anyone complain about it before. I mean, I spoke to it last season that when he went down injured, the Texans defense took a significant downturn. And I mean, at this point in the season, with Jimmy Ward not back, I know some people don't want to hear this, but the only thing that extended the way the Texans defense played past Jalen Petrie's injury to some extent was the availability of Jimmy Ward before he went down injured. So uh, I think that Jalen Petrie has proved his vitality, and he's proved that he's playing above and beyond what anyone should expect from someone who is paid the top nickel corner when he's really doing more than that. So I have huge praise for Jalen Petrie and the performance he's put on this week. Flipping to the offensive side of the ball, we look at Xavier Hutchinson, who had two touchdowns. It wasn't like, light up the stat sheet a lot of yards or anything, but two touchdowns is nothing to scoff at. It was his first touchdown in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken. Um, what do you make of his performance? Like and how do you see his role shaping up for this team? Because throughout the season, and I would know, I'm in a 32 man guillotine league, and one of the things that I used to stay alive in that league was I kept Xavier Hutchinson in my starting lineup because that's how deep things run. And even to this week, that's still the case. And he put up 16 points. It was massively helpful to keeping me alive this week. But he's steadily been commanding more. He has a role carved out in this offense, but how do you see that shaping up throughout this season?
So we really could call this the Iowa State section of the show because I feel like every week we're going to be talking about one of three Iowa State wide receivers. Hutchinson is the senior of the three, and I think with wide receivers it takes a couple years for all of them. Doesn't matter if you're number one or whatever to really find your footing with the routes and the concepts and being able to just be a professional NFL wide receiver in the league. Nico Collins is, who he is. I don't think anybody would question, his ability right now. The first 4 years in the league, didn't really do a whole lot. And obviously he was behind some guys and, just had to like wait his turn. I think Hutchinson has really just waited his turn. Now, with some of the injuries to some guys that they brought in, it's really his time and he's really seized it. I think he's proven to be really sure-handed. Something in talking to Jason Braddock on Houston Sports Talk, another podcast that I'm doing, post game stuff. He's really pointed out that Hutchinson has become a better blocker, and that is what's enabled him to get on the field more. So he really started with just being a really good blocker, and then turned that into opportunities to actually, be on the field to catch passes, catch touchdowns, things of that nature. All three of the Iowa State guys have really contributed over the last 3 weeks. It'll be interesting to see if that's a balance thing, if one of them emerges, or emerges. I'm sorry, but I really feel like right now, looking at it, Hutchinson's the leader in the clubhouse. I really feel like he has the trust of C.J. Stroud, and he was rewarded with 2 touchdowns this week.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I've been looking forward to this moment. I've posted about it a lot. I lumped Xavier Hutchinson in with John Mechie in terms of players that I was like, okay, you were drafted, Hutch more precise. John Mechie was drafted a little higher. But these are two guys that both showed, reason to believe that they could eventually grow into a larger role in this offense. And honestly, over time, those hopes were dampened by the fact that the Texans have made a lot of moves to change that wide receiver room, and grab guys that you would think would command more time over Xavier Hutchinson. But he has still managed to grow and managed to carve out his role in that room. And to that, I say kudos. And I'm glad that he got those 2 touchdowns today. Another touchdown that was handed out today was to Jalen Knoll, since we're in the Iowa State wide receiver vein. What do you make of that touchdown, and how do you see him? So, like, obviously he has done a really good job in special teams with punt and kick return, but do you foresee over the course of the season maybe him carving out a larger role on offense? He's an explosive guy. I mean, I think he can do it, but how do you feel about it?
For me, Jalen Noel is one of the most interesting wide receivers the Texans have right now. And it's weird. It is weird. He is something different, in my opinion, so far that we've seen in Houston in a long time. For the longest time, Houston's a bunch of nice guys. Like we're not here to ruffle feathers. We're not gonna talk too much trash, and Jalen Noel's not that. Dude catches his first NFL touchdown, and what does he do? He does the Ray Lewis squirrel dance in their end zone in front of their fans. Like the stones on this guy to go, I'm gonna do the squirrel right now is amazing. And not care how you feel. Like for me, that's energy that we've never gotten. That's alpha male wide receiver stuff. And I thought maybe Stephon Diggs would have been that a little bit. Obviously, we never got to see it. D Hop was that, but really reserved. Like you really had to pull it out of. I don't think Jalen Noel cares at all. When people talk about dog, that's a dog. And for me, I feel like that's the kind of guy you need to really just give your team an edge that they probably don't have if you don't have that guy, where they're like, we're going to try real hard. Nah, that dude comes in there. I'm at Globo Gym. We're better than you. And we know it. And I love that. I'm here for all of that.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think that even if he never really grows as a wide receiver, what he's able to do in the return game, that alone gives value to the pick that was used to take him. Obviously, I'd like to see him develop as a wide receiver and start to do that. But to speak to your point on doing the squirrel dance and that, I mean, I thought that was great. I thought it was a great outward showing of like confidence and really, what was really interesting to me was the player on the Ravens defense that came up to confront him about it is a guy who was literally on the Packers last season. I'm like, what do you care? You're not like a Ravens legend or anything. But anyways, that was interesting to me. But I think that Jalen Noel, he's an explosive guy. I just that's the big word that comes to mind when I think of him. And I think that if he's given the chance to run some routes, that he'll show up. The last two guys I want to talk about, this is not necessarily positive or negative. I mean, they both had, I think, a pretty good game today, but just overall, whether it be their career in Houston or their short time in Houston this season, it's been some questions raised about them. So I just want to bring them up. But let's start with Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz had a couple of good receptions today. How just quarter of the way through the season, just to check up, how do you feel about Dalton Schultz so far and how he's contributed to this Texans offense?
I feel about Dalton Schultz the way I've always felt about Dalton Schultz. And that is, he is a great receiving tight end that as long as you don't ask him to do too much more than that, he will be very, very good. It's only when you put him in positions not to be successful, because let's be honest, he's just not the best blocker. Although we've seen him this season, make a couple blocks. I just think that it needs to be sparingly. I think in years past, what frustrated a lot of guys is that they asked him to be, this huge, big bad blocking tight end. That's not who he is. And this season, I think Nick Caley has done a really good job of using him and going, okay, if I am going to ask you to block, it'll be to chip or something like that. I'm not going to put you on an edge rusher by yourself and pray you can block him, because that's a mistake. And I think it's really good that, CJ's going back to him. I think for a couple games, I felt like he was kind of getting away from him. Then he kind of, the last couple of games, you've seen an emergence from him as far as like yardage and targets. I think he's really sure-handed, and that needs to be the check down security blanket. There was a couple of times, if there was any negative on CJ's game, which there isn't, because he was absolutely phenomenal. 3 incompletions, I think, all game. Just this crazy video game numbers. Is that there was one check down to Chubb that should have been Woody Marks or Dalton Schultz, but that's really nitpicking right there, and I'm not here to do that. I think CJ was phenomenal, and I think Dalton is going to be this going forward, and people are going to be like, "Wow, where'd this guy come from?" And be like, "Well, he was always there. We just were not using him correctly."
Yeah, I mean, I think I see your point there. My biggest frustration is that, like, I agree. That's what he is. Ask him to do that. I'm glad that we didn't have to see a Schultz hurdle in this one where he somehow feels the need to leave the ground for what appears to be no discernible reason and doesn't help him get the yards that are needed to move the chains. Dalton Schultz is a reliable target. I think he's a very average tight end overall and excels at the receiving aspect. I think that the biggest frustration, and I mean, from me, from the fans, or whoever you want to say, is that the contract that he signed going into this season, he played on a discount his first season, and I thought did really good and was exceptionally utilized in that. And that's, I think, part of the problem too. It's not just on Dalton. Like I said, he's been a reliable target. His utilization has been here and there and all around the square, if you know what I mean. So he's being paid very good tight end money, and there's just this part of me that doesn't feel like the value is being returned on that. And like, I mean, maybe I'm asking too much. Maybe I value the money too much. Maybe I don't understand how tight end contracts work and their value, but there's this feeling in me that there should be more production. And another part of that could be that the Texans have just thrown so many offensive weapons at the offense. They're just like, well, draft, wide receiver acquisition, and there's only so much room. And I spoke to at the beginning of the episode. One of the big positives I had is that DJ is distributing the ball. So and maybe it's just lofty expectations that are unrealistic based off of where the ball is being distributed to, how many players need to eat in this offense. But if that's the case, to me, right, like I think it's very clear that when Dalton Schultz's contract is up, you should be looking to go budget at the tight end position. I don't think you need to cut him. I think he's good at what he does. But I think that if you're moving to a point where you're going to have so many weapons that tight end is not going to be a focal point, you're not looking at a Sam Laporta, TJ Hawkinson, like Travis Kelsey level tight end, or George Kittle. then just go out and take your seventh round pick from Iowa and put him in, and just get guys that can block and have shown to be able to catch somewhat. So I don't know. I mean, that's my thought on it. Another player, the last player I want to look at, and then we'll kind of bring this thing to a close, is Christian Kirk. Now, Christian Kirk had a pretty big reception in this game, a nice little 45, 49 yarder, I think. And throughout the course of this game, had some receptions. And this conversation, honestly, going through the Dalton Schultz conversation, might end the same. There's just a lot of people in this room that need to eat. But from being injured week one to his return, not exactly helping this Texans offense because he didn't really see a significant target share. How do you feel about Christian Kirk so far after trading for him in the offseason?
I feel like the rumors of Christian Kirk's demise were a little premature. I think it was always going to take him a couple of weeks to kind of figure out his role. I think also you got to look at Nick Haley a little bit and go, okay, where is he trying to go with the football? I think this week you really saw CJ and Nick, if they're a team, really make a concerted effort to spread the ball around. One of the things that I loved about this game more than anything else was CJ's decisiveness to get it out quick and to take the check down, to take the 5-7 yard pass, as opposed to scrambling around, holding on to the football too long and taking unnecessary sacks. For me, I think that means you're going to get more Christian Kirk. I think you're going to get more Dalton Schultz. And I think when you look at where their offenses can come from to what it is now, where they're able to scheme up plays to, even plays that don't work, like the pick play that was called for a penalty where, I think it was Bates, the backup tight end, got caught up in a pick play. That sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The willingness to do things like that, to get guys open, to find advantages, you're going to have the ball spread all over the football field. Now, for me, you talk about Dalton Schultz. What kind of money is Nico Collins making? Do you want to talk about Nico Collins' stat line today? No one's questioning Nico Collins. Nico Collins didn't go put up Nico Collins money numbers. And I don't care. Like, I feel like there are going to be games where he is unstoppable. And it's just like, I'm going to force you to do that. And he's going to get 100 yards and 2 scores. Then there are games where I feel like CJ can throw the ball to 8 different guys and have, all of them with catches, or have 10 guys with targets and 8 guys with catches. And the numbers aren't going to look like that. If you're going to put up 44 points, I don't care who eats as long as everybody's eating.
Yeah, I feel you. And starting that conversation out, I think as it went on, I was like, okay, well, there are a lot of guys that need to eat. And so I think over the course of the season, all you can ask is that those guys, when their moment comes, they show up. I think, and looking at the way CJ distributed the ball today, sometimes he's only going to have so many guys that he can get the ball to. And when those guys get their number called, they need to be able to show up. And so I think in the future, if we're having negative conversations about those guys, it'll be because their moment came and they did not rise to the occasion. But looking ahead, the Texans are on their bye week, so obviously we will not be doing a preview at the end of this week, and then at the beginning of next week we won't have a recap. So it'd be a little bit of a brief break. So we have our live this week, and then the next time you'll see us is the live the following week. So just for your knowledge, for your information. But Tom, do you have any final thoughts before we bring this thing to a close?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you talked about looking ahead. The next game's Monday night, prime time, West Coast against the Seahawks. I think it's going to be a really good game. Seahawks went up against a same Tampa team that we took to one possession, late game stuff, and they lost to them. So a really good football team. Part of me hates that the bye came when it did, because if you were ever going to want to keep going, it's when you've got everything working. And it feels like the Texans have everything working. And now they're going to get, a week and a half off. So for the next 10 days, you're not going to be able to lean into that. And it's going to kind of, I hope that they don't skip a beat. But I think the natural thing is to, take some time, relax, kind of slow it back down. And they got to ramp it back up to get ready to go. Where, when you have a normal, 6-day turnaround, you really don't have that time to kind of, take your foot off the gas. Uh, After that, we're talking about 3 games at home, and they could all be they're all good opponents, but they could all be very important to getting back into the thick of the AFC South race. I don't think when the season started anybody thought that the AFC South would be this juggernaut that it is. But right now, I mean, they've got 3 teams that are sitting there, and it's like all of them are playoff teams. If you wanted to get into that conversation,
Yeah, it's going to make it a little tough because we're going to have to get ahead of the Colts or the Jaguars to crack a playoff spot. So we'll see how it shapes up. But I mean, I agree that going into Monday Night Football after a week off, that was one thing that came up. I like that the bye week was here at first, but then watching the momentum build against the Titans and the Ravens, it kind of makes you think maybe it would have been better if it was a little later since they're starting to figure it out. And going into Seattle, an environment that's known to be super loud, and they're a good team this year, so it will be. But yeah, I mean, looking ahead, I mean, I'm excited to see what this Texans team can do, and I think that a win in Seattle will go a long way for this Texans team in terms of fully restoring them to where a lot of people had them going into the season. So I'm excited to see it. Thanks for tuning into the bullpen. I have been James Roy. You can find me on social media at James Roy NFL on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Tom is at TCTom1 on Instagram and Third Coast Tom on Twitter. And we are the bullpen, the #1 veteran-owned Texans sports podcast in the Houston area. But also the #1 Houston Texans podcast that's run by veterans in the universe until further notice. So, like I said, thanks for tuning in. And as always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans.